Welcome to Walking and Talking, a resource from Emmaus Bible Church in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm Josh.
Ron.
Zach.
Luke.
And today we're going through 10 books that have had a profound influence on our life. Oftentimes when I think back, there's events, people, and particularly books that will kind of change the trajectory of your thinking, or perhaps how you want to run your family or even your church. And so today I want to talk to the pastors and Zach about those books that have had a profound influence on their lives. So to start off with, Pastor Luke, what have been start with the first book of your three that you want to highlight have had a unique influence upon you?
Yeah, the first one is called Worldly Saints, and those seem like two contradictive terms because saints is like set apart and different, but worldly is like just common and like everybody else. So the point is they've been called they've been called set-apart people. The Puritans, basically, is what I'm talking about. But they were very much engaged in the world in such a way that the title works. So it's kind of a play on words as people think about the Puritans. So Worldly Saints, the Puritans as They Really Were by Leland Ryken. I loved this book because it introduced me to these people whom I credit a lot of, under God's grace, the growth and direction of my life and ministry because of their big God-centered view of God and the world. And so this book is trying to clarify any caricatures. So then it's going to also cover topics like what they viewed about work and marriage and sex, money, family, preaching, church and worship, the Bible, education, and social action, and just a wonderful introduction to that time period and straightening out the mentality. And so that then led me to be like, wow, I need to give these guys a fair shake, which led me into their writings and then their confession, which is Westminster Confession, and for us, Baptist, Second London Baptist Confession. So profoundly shaped my life and ministry. With that, then, is a couple other books that are Puritans, because that led me to John Owen and his work, The Glory of Christ, and then also Mortification of Sin, which I think those two pair very well together. So The Glory of Christ is having a very grand, high, lofty view of who Christ is and his splendor and majesty and glory, and how that's seen in the scriptures, in even the church, and the means of grace, and these things that is a transforming, powerful influence in your life, shaping your affections. And then the mortification of sin is the putting to death the sin that continues on. And that book is just a short book that I'd highly recommend, very concise, clear about how to engage the flesh and the indwelling sin, corruption that remains. So that was great. And then lastly, let me just see, I've got it listed here. Oh, Preachers and Preaching. So as a pastor, I'm always trying to fuel and inform and shape my preaching by other godly preachers from the past. And so Preachers and Preaching by Martyn Lloyd-Jones, which originated as some lectures that he preached or taught at Westminster Seminary at the end of his ministry. Actually, he was retired, I believe, when he did this, and just talking about the theology of preaching and some of the practical things that I thought has, more than any other book, shaped my preaching. I can't say I preach like Martyn Lloyd in the same way, but in terms of how he viewed preaching, its importance, and how he approached it, I love it. It always fires me up. Which, just in that same category, biographies of Spurgeon. So learning about preaching through Lloyd-Jones, but then seeing it all fleshed out in the life of a man. Any biography of Spurgeon is going to be good, but his autobiography, 2 volumes, incredible. Some of the most invigorating reading I've ever had in terms of his boldness, love for Christ, his willing to preach in and out of season, his controversy that he faced in life and persevered through, and his health concerns, all just beautifully written, published by his wife, actually. as she compiled a lot of what he had done. So those are my 3 recommendations. I'm so thankful for them. Obviously, it's hard to boil down the books you've read into 3, but those are a good start.
Yeah, very nice. Zach, what are some books that have been helpful, influential for you?
I would say number one, so I'll say the first one that was influential in me, Confessing Sin to My Wife, Finally Free by Heath Lambert. I think that book just really, Pastor Heath just really broke it down on a base level, going through like how you deal with sexual sin in a biblical way, in a right way. And that ultimately, I remember generally where I was outside of a house when there were a bunch of workers going. I was working with my dad at the time. This was back in 2020. I was listening to it on Audible. I listened to that point, and I was conflicted with the sin, and Valerie didn't know about it. And I was like, I heard this passage about you have to confess to your wife. And I was like, I need to do this. And I felt moved by the Spirit, like convicted, like it was very clear. And not that wasn't necessarily clear before, but he just made it like crystal. And so I think that book is just helpful as men are fighting through sin, obviously, but it's also just a helpful book to revisit and how we're to process through and fight sin in general, not just for sexual purity, but also just general purity, pursuing righteousness, holiness, finally free. If you want to finally be free of sin, whatever that sin is, something that you struggle with, pride, arrogance, anything, that would be a great resource. And it's something that was obviously influential for me because it's something that God used to bring me to my knees. The other book, in the midst of dealing through just emotional things, specifically anxiety, Follow the Lamb by Horatius Bonar, a 17th century Scottish minister. He's the brother of Andrew Bonar, but he has a book called Follow the Lamb. And basically, he has 12 different things to say. The subtitle of the book, Follow the Lamb, it's Follow the Lamb, a console for converts. So it's intended for newer believers, but I've recently given it to folks that I think that just need to be reminded of things that obviously new converts need to understand, but all of us need to be reminded of. So he goes through it. He's, I'll read just some of them off, but be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. So understanding that, basing it off of 2 Timothy 2:1. One of the things that's great about this book is Horatius gives so many biblical references that you can he's bringing up this idea. Oh, that's where he gets it from. It's not just opinion. The point that was really helpful for me is keeping the conscience clean, and on and on it goes. Hold fast to that which you've received. Deal honestly with yourselves. Keep company with God and with the people of God. Study the Bible. Take heed to your steps. Put away vainglory and love of praise. Watch against Satan. Beware of one-sided truth. Do something for God. So serving. Lastly, live waiting for your Lord. And it gives some hymns at the end, older hymns. I don't remember what those are. I don't think I've even sung them, but yeah, that's just a really helpful book, and it's really small. You can just buy it on Amazon. It's like $7. Read through that. That's just a helpful biblical companion. Like, what does it mean to be a Christian? Go there, and he's going to give you 12 things. Like, this is exactly what you ought to be doing, what you ought to be thinking about, remembering, and so forth.
Very nice.
But yeah, those are 2.
Yeah.
There's another one on my mind, but I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
Only 2. So.
I did get a little laugh and a little giggle. Luke said he did 3, but there are definitely 5 books in there.
I smuggled a few in
so
there.
we'll do 10-ish books for the title of this podcast.
Yeah.
Ron, what are 3 or more books that you have found influential and profound?
Well, Luke hit on 3 of my favorites as well. All 3 of those, Worldly Saints and Owen's Volume 6. And what was your third one?
Lloyd-Jones.
Lloyd-Jones.
Which third one?
But I had picked Volume 6 as one of my, I say favorite. It's pretty hard hitting. You have to be, it's not for the faint-hearted. It really smacks you around and just makes you really question yourself. I read it very early in my ministry, and he really sets the tone for what's the expectations are of the Christian life. The only thing I would add is it's always recommended in that Volume 6, he also has a treatise on Psalm 130 on temptation and sin, and that is sort of like you said, The Glory of Christ is a balance. That treatise, The Temptation of Sin, sort of rounds the edges in a very positive and helpful way to the mortification of sin. So, since he stole my book, I'm going to go to Spurgeon's 2 volumes by Ian Murray. When I started reading those, I couldn't put them down. I found myself hiding in quiet places away from people, just reading and reading and reading. It was my first, I'd always heard quotes by Spurgeon, and, no matter what church group denomination you're in, they always quote Spurgeon. But this was a very thorough, in-depth treatise on Spurgeon. And Dallimore has written a book as well on Spurgeon.
Really good.
There's a lot of good books that have been written on his life as well. But that was one of my first introductions to a large biography of Spurgeon, and it was indeed one of those that stirred me at that time in my ministry. And then it's a little booklet it's another Banner of Truth book. It's the Letters of John Newton. It's the Banner edition, which is a condensed version. There's a Baker edition that has a lot more of his letters, and of course the works of John Newton have most of the letters that were extant or in existence. But that little volume by Banner, they picked the cream of his correspondence to people who asked him questions, and he sat and wrote them responses, and it's just so pastoral. It's so filled with a sense of grace. Newton, I was reading him at a time when I was in a ministry where a great deal of the law was being emphasized, and there were times that I would go home after the sermon that was preached, and I had to pick up Newton's letters or something by Newton and sort of bathe my soul in some of the grace of God that sort of rounded out that deep sense of conviction. He was extremely filled with a sense of grace and wisdom, and just guided young men, women who ask questions. I would put that, since it's such a short read, a lot of people don't know that Newton was William Cowper's pastor. Some people pronounce it Cooper. I'm going with Alistair Begg. He should know. He said it's Cowper, so I'm sticking with him. But he was Cowper's pastor for a long time. Cowper suffered with a great deal of depression, and Newton was the one who worked him through. He was on the borderline of suicide. And even when Cowper moved many miles away outside the parish that Newton was pastoring in, Newton would go and visit him and still keep up with his life and still shepherd his soul. So I would highly recommend that, and especially since it's just a short read. And there are good theologies that have been written since Berkhof, no doubt. But Berkhof certainly is a standard. Even though he's a Paedo-Baptist, I'm a Reformed Baptist, London Baptist, 1689 guy for sure. I think if you could weed through the infant baptism portions of that as a Baptist, it's still, to me, one of the valuable theologies that ought to be on your bookshelf if you want to study. And it's not long. It's not extremely. I won't say it's not deep, because obviously theology is deep, and he handles it in a way, though, I think that is palatable, that's digestible.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I just talked to Pastor Thomas, and he's taking some men through some theology, and that's the theology he chose. At one of them, anyway. So. Yeah, those are my 3. I had so many others that have impacted me, but I'll put those up there at the top.
Great. Well, I do want to take a note real quick. I think we're at 11 books, and only one of the books that we've listed so far has been written by someone who is currently alive. So I want to ask pastors, why should Christians read old books from, quote, dead guys? Why is that so important?
Well, one of the benefits is their writings have been kind of sifted through over time, and when something's been accepted and passed on, it usually means it's good. And sometimes some modern books come out and they're saying things that sound good initially, and then it takes a little while for us to be like, wait a second, I'm not sure that was the best way to go. I mean, that's what the modern Trinitarian debates that came about in the 2016 and stuff. It was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize we're starting to talk about the Trinity different over the last 30 years. And it just stemmed from us, a generation, only reading newer theology, and so there was a retrieval of some of those older works that really helped shape us to a more orthodox and historical view of the Trinity. So that's just one point.
Yeah, I'm not sure because there are certainly some really good current writers. I would hate to discount that and think that the only books that we should be reading are older books, but sometimes they're just rehashes of what's already been said in a better way. The problem with the older books, some of the banner books of the Puritans have been reprinted in modern English. Most people haven't been raised on the King James version of the Bible, so reading old Puritan works sometimes is a struggle. And so new authors, current authors, have not only the reprints in modern English, but they've sort of taken those thoughts. I think of, his name has escaped me now. He sort of rewrote Volume 6 of John Owen.
Yeah, the pastor who wrote The Enemy Within.
The Enemy Within. That's the
Lumgard, or
yes.
Yeah.
So there, I wouldn't want to discount current writers. There are some great writers, but it seems like those old writers just had such a grip on truth. I just picked up a book off the shelf in here by Joseph Alleine and read a section on prayer, and it's so deep and so thorough, convicting, powerful. I told my wife the other day, I read her an excerpt from an old book, and I said, does anybody even think like this anymore? It's just so rich and profound. But you were going to say something.
I was going to say that I one time was reading a book that R.C. Sproul wrote. It was actually just Q&As that he had answered over time, and one question was like, why do you write books? Like, why not just recommend old books? And he says, you know what, if I thought people would sit down and read John Calvin and the Puritans and sit down and just get through it, like, I would gladly burn all my books. Like, I merely write because somehow in my popular style, people are gonna read it, pick it up. But those guys are far superior. That's what he said, And I think there's some truth to that. But as you said, Ron, like, there's definitely some good modern stuff. I mean, modern classic, for instance, R.C. Sproul, it's The Holiness of God, right? It's like, well, shouldn't not read that one because it's written within the last 40 years or whatever.
Technically, Sproul is now an old dead guy, though.
That's true.
He fits the category.
He is, yeah.
He's still current, though. I mean, you're right. His book on holiness, The Pursuit of Holiness by Jerry Bridges. I mean, some of these were monumental books and changing people's lives.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, maybe I can help supplement some of the living authors. The two books that I have are actually guys that are currently living still, though I do love the Puritans, love the Reformers, and so on and so forth. But the first one, this book was very helpful for me as a Protestant to understand, what do I do with church history prior to the Reformation? Is that just a monopoly of the Roman Catholic Church? What do I do with kind of pre-1517 church history? And that book is by Nick Needham. It's 2,000 Years of Christ's Power, Volume 1 on the early church. And what he really helped with was setting forth a paradigm to understand that even Protestants have a family heritage. Their family line genealogy extends back all the way back to the early church, the patristics. He distinguishes there was the early Catholic Church and even uppercase C Catholic Church, and how that became a Roman Catholic Church over time, and that was a deterioration in that regard. And so that book was very helpful to galvanize my trust, my faith, in how God has not just given us the apostles and then kind of, for lack of a better term, burped for 1,500 years and then finally got back on track with the Reformers, but God has preserved a remnant throughout 2,000 years of Christ's power, to use the book title, and how we can stand on the shoulders of an Augustine, an Athanasius, of a Maximus the Confessor. There's these saints of old, even the Middle Ages, most of the things from Aquinas and so on and so forth, Wycliffe, where we can view that part of church history and it's still our history as Protestants and how to understand that. And the second book that was really helpful for me was actually by a guy who used to live here in Omaha. His name was Rory Groves. He now lives in Minnesota. But that book is The Family Economy. And it's a very short book, very concise. He's by no means an academic or a theologian. He's just really a layperson. But what I really appreciated about the book was he put words to my thoughts and feelings about why today the family feels like it's not what it should be. And so he focuses on the family is strong when we worship together, so family worship, when we work together, and then also when we grow in wisdom together. And so the wisdom piece for him is homeschooling. And so he kind of shows how the last 200 years, there's kind of been this slow deterioration of the family, what's caused that, and how we can go back to a strong family unit through these three methods of worshiping together, working together, and learning together. So those are the two books for me. Rory Groves' The Family Economy, and then 2,000 Years of Christ's Power, Volume 1, The Early Church by Nick Needham. Before we close, brothers, any final thoughts?
Take up and read. Make the time to sit down and read or listen to books or whatever it takes. But the more informed you can be about the world, about God, the more life is enriched by it.
I would agree with that. I would say now there's so much more available now, podcasts and so much on the social media, internet available. But in the early days of my reforming period of pastoring, people that read were miles ahead of people who didn't. We try to constantly get good books in people's hands, and it just made a huge difference in the life of the church, people being saturated with just good, solid theology, biographies, just good reading, history, church history. It'll change. It'll change the whole tone, the whole culture of your church if people are plugged in.
Yeah. I got this proverb from Steve Voles, Proverbs 23:23, buy truth, and do not sell it. Buy wisdom, buy instruction, and buy understanding. I think one way that we can buy truth, wisdom, instruction, and understanding is by purchasing and reading really good, great books from those who have faithfully walked with Christ before us.
And if you can't purchase them, you can borrow them. Ron has a huge library he loves to share his books with, but then also we have a church library that you'll really want to take advantage of. A lot of those books have been put in there for a purpose. They've been approved by the pastors. And so, no excuse to not take up and read.
Yeah. And if you want help and accountability, there's several book studies in the group, or in the church rather, book clubs, book studies in the church. I think of the Schleifers. Mary, she heads up a book reading group of classical literature. Think of a Moby Dick or a Paradise Lost by Milton. I'm blanking on his name now.
That's right.
John
Milton. I know that several ladies get together in a couple of different book groups to read, whether it's doctrine, theology, homemaking, education. So Zach and I have some book studies going on currently, as well as some that are upcoming. So by all means, we would encourage you to read in company. Well, if you found this podcast helpful, we simply ask that you would share it with a friend from church so you can discuss it together. And we'll see you next time on Walking and Talking.